Good afternoon. As I've been introduced, I had the distinct misfortune of prosecuting some of the worst genocide suspects, suspects who were alleged to have committed genocide against the Tutsi. For 9 years, I was a prosecutor at the ICTR, and then, you know, the ICTR was an ad hoc tribunal. So as it wound down its work, I came back home, and I worked with the Office of the Prosecutor, the National Public Prosecution Authority here, assisting with finding the fugitives wherever they were, requesting for their extradition, and assisting in trying them back home. Also, I have had the occasion to actually be part of the cases that are being tried abroad. And the experience that I'm going to speak about comes from that background. This morning, I think Dr. Bizimana touched on something important in our history. The genocide in Rwanda in 1994 against the Tutsi is not something that happened only in 1994. It is something that had been part and parcel of our history. So it had become part of what was expected to happen in Rwanda since 1959. And what does this mean? Tutsi were massacred periodically, 1959, in the 60s, in the 70s, in 1992, and then you had 1994. So when you talk about impunity, Dr. Bizimana spoke about the fact that there were laws that followed the earlier massacres that gave amnesty to perpetrators. That is something that we should not take for granted. So the genocide that happened in 1994 was a result of decades of indoctrination, of dehumanization, and making sure that how do regular people just rise up, as the perpetrators call it spontaneously, and massacre their neighbors, and kill innocent children, and kill unborn children, and kill women and men? So when you see what happened here in Rwanda in 1994, right after the genocide, you had the entire apparatus of government. I think we all know, people who are all here in the conference, we all know that genocides do not succeed if they don't have the backing of a government and its apparatus. So the perpetrators went into exile and spread around the world. And this is where you have the people that have the most to gain from denying the genocide against the Tutsi being the key perpetrators, and they're propagating this denial wherever they are in the world. And I'll talk about some of the theories of what they're saying out there that is taking hold and is resulting into denial of the genocide and continued impunity. As early as August, after they had fled, I'll read you the words of one of the key perpetrators that I had the misfortune of trying in Arusha, one Francois Carrera. Francois Carrera used to be the prefect of Kigali City. He was a very powerful man. And then by the time of the genocide, he was the prefect of Kigali, which is the surroundings of Kigali. So in August 1994, he was in Congo. They were all still in denial about what had happened in Rwanda. They were in denial about the fact that they had been uprooted and the fact that they had committed genocide. So he was interviewed by the New York Times. And these are the words he said when they asked him what he had done in Rwanda and what they as a government had left behind them in Rwanda. He said, "The Tutsi are originally bad. They are murderers. The Tutsi have given the white people their daughters. Physically, they are weak. Look at their arms and their legs. No Tutsi can build. They are too weak. They just command. The others work. If the reasons are just, the massacres are justified. And he was trying to justify the fact that, the RPF Tutsi were coming back to make sure the Hutu are subjugated again, like it was in the past. And then they asked him, but you committed genocide. And he said, we cannot use that word genocide because there are numerous surviving. What does that say to you? His only regret was that some Tutsi had survived in Rwanda. And then he said sarcastically, I was talking the other day to a representative of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. I said, okay, you say the Tutsi are good, but that's like telling me you are white when I am black. So when I was listening to the presenters earlier who were talking about the Holocaust, they too were talking about the fact that Jews have been historically marginalized and portrayed as evil, as the devil. It was the same thing in this country. So these key perpetrators of the genocide, who were highly educated, by the way, highly educated, they should have had some intellectual ability to see that perpetuating this kind of mentality is something unacceptable. But these are the ones who are influencing the masses. All the people that were in government were educated. And they had a reason to deny the existence of a genocide, because if the genocide did not happen, how can I be responsible individually for a genocide that didn't happen? So when we go to the ICTR, in the first 10 years, before trying anybody, for every case, we first of all had to prove that a genocide against the Tutsi happened. For every single case. Because you know why? That is the first legal question that the defense brought up. There was no genocide. And you wonder how, if a tribunal was set up, an international criminal tribunal was set up to try perpetrators of a genocide, how could you question that a genocide happened? But this was all part of the denial and the planning that was to assist the suspects. In 2007, we had a breakthrough, because in the case of Karemera, Edouard Karemera and others, the International Tribunal actually did something that we call judicial notice of the existence of the genocide against the Tutsi. So it became a fact. And from then on, we could try all these perpetrators without having to prove that a genocide happened to begin with. When you talk about denial of a genocide, I'll look to the Rwandan laws on denial. The 2018 law on the crime of genocide, ideology, and related crimes defines it in a number of ways. It says denial of genocide happens when a person who in public commits an act intended to state or indicate that the genocide is not genocide, distort the facts about genocide for the purpose of misleading the public, affirms that there was double genocide in Rwanda, states or indicates that the genocide was not planned. So the key perpetrator of the genocide, the number one perpetrator who everybody talks about, is Bagosora. In his defense, he cited a few reasons why they and others who are accused of genocide are not responsible for it. The first defense they had is that the RPF invasion of Rwanda in 1990, its repeated violation of ceasefire agreements and strategy of guerrilla-like war and infiltration were important causes of the genocide. So when you talk about denial and continued impunity, you try to shift responsibility from the people who are responsible to the victims, which is one of the themes that we are looking at today. And then they said the failure of the Arusha Accords, and the major barrier to the implementation was the RPF's intransigence. Still, the RPF is being blamed for what they did. And then they blamed what was happening in Burundi for causing the genocide here. They say in neighboring Burundi for decades, the Tutsi were killing their Hutu brethren, and therefore, when the Hutus here decided to kill the Tutsi, self-defense, because the Tutsi were going to kill them as well. All these are theories of denying what happened. And then the most interesting defense was that all those massacres that are being talked about as being a genocide against the Tutsi, those people were actually killed by the RPF in their areas of control. Where the government forces were, nothing happened. Everything happened in the RPF, and this is something that was going on and happening in court as a defense. Today, you have different theories of genocide denial that are happening in social media, in courts when we request for extradition, and all over the net. I'm sure everybody has heard of the theory of, yes, Tutsi were killed, but the majority of the victims were Hutus. If you go online and you look at the information that is there, every time new massacre sites are discovered, because up to now we still discover new graves. The perpetrators out there, they keep writing things like, those are Hutus who were massacred by the RPA. They should not lie to you that these are victims of the Tutsi genocide. The other theory is that the genocide against the Tutsi is a propaganda of the RPF to keep themselves in power. It never happened. And this is just 25 years later. I mean, there are people who deny the Holocaust 75 years later. At least you feel if there's a bit of time. This has been happening since the beginning because, as you know, denial is the last stage of the genocide. And then there's always the theory that it was all very spontaneous because the RPF shot down the President Habyarimana's plane, and therefore the Hutus thought their father, the father of the nation, had been killed, so they decided to revenge. But all of this ignores the reality and the facts that are borne out by evidence. You have all the machetes that were being imported. You have all the incitement that was going on at the time.
5 minutes.
Okay. You have all these things that were going on. You have leaders who are preparing. If you came from Butare, for example, you are responsible for planning what was going to happen in Butare against the Tutsi. It does not explain how, a few hours after the plane crash, you had roadblocks all over, you had all the lists that were already prepared, people being massacred right away. So all of that does not bear out of evidence of spontaneity. They say all the deaths, the massacres, that all of these are a result of a civil war between the RPA and the ex-FAR. And then when we go request for extradition of perpetrators to Rwanda, the first thing that comes out of court is that these are political opponents of the current government in Rwanda, and they're being sought after because of their political leanings, not because they're genocide suspects. There's a phenomenon that is going on lately in the denial of genocide, and this is where witnesses are being compromised to assist genocide suspects. So witnesses originally give statements to prosecutors with, detailing what these perpetrators did. But somehow, after they testify in different courts, especially at the ICTR and in this country, or after they give statements to prosecutors, they are approached somehow by the defense and they give them recanting evidence. And they have to justify why that evidence is different from the original statement. And you know what they're saying? These witnesses are being pressured by the authorities in Rwanda to give false testimonies. And then you have requests for reviews before courts of law. And this is all distorting history. And they're doing this very easily to deny genocide and to continue impunity. Because if you have key witnesses recanting their testimony and saying, you know, I was pressured by government authorities to give a statement against this person. In fact, they're innocent. I was tortured. And all this it's very much made up. But it changes the course of the trial. It changes the decision on their responsibility. And it changes the history of what happened in this country. It is all being done by perpetrators of genocide in order to continue not paying for what they did, continuing their impunity, and denying the genocide. Thank you.